Wow. She said, got you don't like it.
Okay.
Get closer, get closer. There you go.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out and zooming in for our August meeting. The year's already winding down. Anyway, so thanks for coming out tonight. I'm glad to see everybody. I know we have a few folks that would normally attend that are out ill. A couple of them are on Zoom tonight. Hi, Craig and Betsy. And hi, other Zoomers. Nice to see everybody. Are there any first-time visitors? New members? Yeah, Becky. We're gonna hear a lot about you in a few minutes, I think. Debbie, I don't know if we know you. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Of course.
Hang on, I'm trying to unmute myself.
You did it.
Oh.
Anyway, I was invited by Betsy and Craig. We took a wonderful trip to Antarctica and are so really eager to see your presentation.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for tuning in. Thanks to Craig and Betsy for inviting me. And Brian, we see you there, and PJ and Jesse, everybody, nice to see y'all. Anybody in here, first time or new? Helen, they haven't been here a long time, so say hi, Helen.
Hi, Ellen.
Anybody been diving lately? Got a trip report? Okay, well, Joe, why don't you go ahead and speak up real quick?
This will be short and sweet because we were scheduled to do 10 dives in Key Largo with the adaptable group from Fort Worth, but out of the 10 dives we were scheduled for, we got 3. The wind had kicked up and had it too rough, and the first dive we did on Monday was very difficult to get back on the boat with people that were normally in wheelchairs. So that was quite the adventure. Nobody got hurt, and we're looking forward to take the same group to Cayman Brac in September. So should be
Hope
fun.
you have better weather.
Yeah.
Dennis, did you say?
Well, yeah, but Kathy, well, she was there with me.
I was there.
Did we report on this last month?
Well, I think you.
Oh, we did already talk about Fiji? Okay,
About it.
okay, sorry, we don't need to redo it.
Yes, you do for us Zoomers.
Anybody been diving lately? You want to talk about it?
Brian.
Brian, you want to talk about your trip to, you're on mute or you're not talking, Brian, we can't hear you. You're not on mute, but we can't hear you at all.
We can't reach your lips.
We can't hear you. That's weird. Because you don't have the mute symbol by your name, so you're not muted. Something else is going on with your mic.
Maybe he doesn't have a
Volume
mic.
turned down.
Okay,
El No Hero.
I know that he was Cozumel, right? Nod your head.
No, it was Fort Lauderdale.
There you are.
So you want to talk about your class you attended?
Yeah, so I went down to Fort Lauderdale to get in macro class at the Blue Heron Bridge with Reef Photo, and the dive op was Pura Vida Divers. It was 2 days of what they called muck diving, and gosh, if we had clear water in 15 foot of depth here with lots of little critters, I would be all over muck diving, but our muck diving is a lot muckier. So it was a good 2-day exercise. If you want to tune up your macro game, I really recommend it. They were pushing some blackwater diving, but I don't like too many variables on my dive, so I just stuck to the plan of doing my macro training and kind of getting used to. I bought an Inon Z330 while I was there, and I really like it, even though I'm shooting full manual now with my Olympus M1 Mark II. So I went to the dark side. So
Nothing wrong with manual. All right, well, good. Glad you had a good trip. We look forward to seeing some pictures from that. Mike, did you have a dive report?
Yeah, well, I just did a week on a liveaboard in the northern Sea of Cortez, the Rocio del Mar. It's a pretty good ship. I like it. Diving was hit or miss in terms of photography, but down south with the Midriff Islands, diving with the sea lions is truly magical.
Sounds good. Anybody else on Zoom or here? Dive report? They went to Fiji, but we talked about last month. Yeah. Okay, Mitch. Hi, Mitch. I can't let you go by without saying hello. You want to introduce yourself briefly?
Hey, yeah. My name's Mitch. Friends with David. Yeah, I live in New England these days, but born and raised in Houston, and David invited me along here. I dive CCR primarily these days up in New England, up in the Boston area. But yeah.
So Mitch is a very close family friend. His little sister and my daughter are from the same orphanage in China. We've been friends with his family since. How old were you when we went to China to get Emma?
I think I was 6 years old.
Yeah, so I met him when he was like 5 or 6 years old when we went to China. So anyways, he's been on several dive trips with us recently. I actually wrote about him in one of the HUPS newsletter articles about his techie buoyancy skills and everything, and how he was harassing photographers for having bad buoyancy. But Mitch and I had a lot of fun. He's a tech diver, and those ice diving and rebreathers. I invited him today. I thought the program would be of interest to him. So thanks for tuning in, Mitch.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, let's see. Any other announcements, anybody? All right, keep it brief.
Yeah, I know that Jennifer's been diving.
Jennifer, you have a trip report?
Oh, she just,
Hey, Jennifer, do you have a trip report? We're just finishing up the dive reports. Can you hear us? I feel on the spot.
Trying to get organized. What was the question?
Do you have a trip report? We're just finishing up the dive trip reports. Now, I know you probably.
yeah.
Where. So I thought
Just got
maybe-
back from Roatan. We were at Cocoa View for a week. I had 20 divers. The Red Boat Rocks, Frogfish. I figured out where all the seahorses are on the Prince Albert, and you know, it was a good week.
Okay, we're good. Glad you had a good time. And I'm off for September 13th with you guys.
Absolutely. I'll be there on September 12th, and you're coming to talk to us on the 13th.
Awesome. And I'll do a program for Agalian Scuba Dive Club.
yeah, I'm gonna try to make that too.
Should be fun. All right.
Come on up.
I look forward to it. Okay, Dennis, I guess we'll turn it over to you.
Oh, okay, well. Let's see if I can get myself on here. Hi there. And I'm here to introduce the program today. Jesse was the one that came to me after his trip to Antarctica, and he said, you know, I met this person down there that has all this experience, and you probably need to get in contact with her and ask her to give a presentation. And so I got in touch with Becky, and she agreed to come and talk to us some about her experiences diving in the Antarctic. And Jesse will be starting off our show with a short presentation of the one that he and Becky were on back in the early part of this year. I think it was January, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah. And so he'll start that off, and then Becky will give an introduction to herself, talk a little bit about her diving and the things that she does, and then go right into her program. And I think we're all looking very much for this presentation. We're really, I'm very pleased to have two people, pros and semi-pros here, that are as credentialed as they are. And I know it's going to be a great show. Okay, take it away.
Okay, so Dennis, thank you very much. And hi, everybody. Good to be here. Good to see everybody. And as Dennis explained, I'm the opening act. I've got I'll call it a mini presentation that I'm going to give before I turn it over to Becky. And what I'm going to do in 10 to 15 minutes really is four things. And first, I'm going to explain why I went to Antarctica. Then I'm going to tell you how I got there, and that's pretty easy. And then the third thing is I'm going to mention a couple of, I think, are pretty interesting, unique things about Antarctica, and they're really not even diving related, but I'm going to mention them anyway. And then lastly, I'm going to wrap things up before turning over to Becky with a 3-minute slide presentation. Actually, it's an MP4, a PowerPoint converted to an MP4. I'm not even going to talk. It's just 3 minutes of music and seeing the few images that I was able to capture there. So let me start off. Why I went there. Okay, several years ago, I went to a chum meeting, and folks at Ocean Wide Expeditions gave a presentation on Antarctica. And I was really, really impressed. And I just said, hey, I've got to, while I'm still young, I need to go to Antarctica. Well, I can still do it. And so I added that to my bucket list. And, you know, people who know me, they know I'm a goal setter kind of guy. I like to set goals. And I set 3 goals for this trip. The first goal was to be able to set foot on our 7th continent. Okay, so I've done 6, but I hadn't done the 7th yet. The second one was I wanted to be able to scuba dive on all 7. Well, the plan was I was going to go to Europe before Antarctica. The Europe didn't happen because I haven't dived in Europe yet. The Europe didn't happen because of COVID. But anyway, I went to Antarctica. And then the third goal was to bring back images above and under. You know, it was not, I wasn't under any pressure or anything. I just wanted to have fun and capture some images. So the short story is that I was able to achieve 2.5 of my goals. That's the way I put it. I set foot on Antarctica. I walked around. I got images on the continent. I did get in the water. I was able to snorkel. The first dive, I had an equipment problem, so I snorkeled. The second dive, I was able to make. So here's what happened. Our trip itinerary on this Antarctica trip included 5 full days in Antarctica. That was the plan. The plan was 5 full days in Antarctica with 2 dives a day. If you wanted to do 2 dives a day, you didn't have to do 2 dives a day. But because of circumstances beyond anyone's control, we got hit with a COVID outbreak on board. And instead of 5 days in Antarctica, we ended up with 2 days in Antarctica. And then because of the COVID, we had to turn around. So, okay, I was dealt, that's the hand I was dealt, we were dealt. And the 2 days I was there, one day I got to land on the continent. And then the second day I was able to do 1 snorkel and 1 dive. Actually, I feel fortunate that I was even able to do that much because others were less fortunate. But again, I'm not going to go into all the details, but you know, it was just something beyond anyone's control. So now you might ask me, was I glad I went? I was, hell yes, I was glad I went. It was a fantastic experience. Absolutely, yes, I am glad I went, even though I only got 2 days instead of 5 days. Experiencing Antarctica, I'll tell you, it's the closest thing to going to another planet. It is out of this world, and to see it in person, and you've got to see it in person. The icebergs, some are floating, some are grounded. You got these flat ice flows. You've got this really unique ice blueness that you see there. And you look around in a panoramic view and you've got this ocean that's just filled with ice. And then in the background, you've got snow-covered mountains. It's just, it's just an incredible to be there. The visuals of Antarctica are just like nothing I can describe very well. Then you've got the seals, the penguins, the birds that can fly and the birds that can't fly. But species that you'll see at no other place. And really, that's what I really want to impress upon people who haven't been to Antarctica, that it's out of this world. Okay, so how did I get there? And this is pretty simple. I was leaving from Houston. I ended up flying to Miami and overnighting in Miami before flying to Buenos Aires. I did have to overnight in Buenos Aires. And then the final destination by air was Ushuaia, which is the very southern tip of Argentina, the southernmost town, southernmost airport in the world. Of course, I'm talking about not airports in Antarctica, but airports in the other continents. And anyway, 3 takeoffs and landings on the way there. On the way back, it was simpler because I was able to fly from Ushuaia to Buenos Aires and catch a nonstop flight on United from Buenos Aires back to Houston. So getting there and getting back, very simple. You're on the central, if you live in Houston and live in the central time zone, you're in the central time zone the whole time. So you don't have to worry about jet lag. Now, of course, it's dry suit diving, and there's no getting around that. And if dry suits are a showstopper, then I would say, hey, go to Antarctica anyway and just go on the land, because it'll be worth it. But you do need to know, you do need to have experience, dry suit diving experience. And I'm not going to go into all the details of that, but don't ever try diving a dry suit without taking a course. And it's something you really need to have training. You don't want to just buy a dry suit and think because you're a wetsuit diver, you can dive in a dry suit. Okay, so before I get into my 3 minutes of images, I didn't want to mention 2 things, and I think this is kind of cool things about Antarctica. And you know, most people know that Antarctica, that no country or countries have territorial rights in Antarctica. But not everybody knows, well, exactly how did that happen? And back in the 1950s, there were 7 nations that were trying to drive a stake in the ground and claim territory in Antarctica. And so this went on for a while. And what happened was in the United States in 1959, they led a 12-country conference to agree on the legal status of Antarctica. And everybody agreed that it would only be used for science and peaceful purposes. And so these nations signed a treaty that still exists today. And there's more than 50 countries that have acceded to this treaty. And there's all sorts of things that are specified, but I'm just going to mention that there's no military type things going on that are allowed. No weapons, no testing of weapons or nuclear explosions. It prohibits disposal of radioactive waste and any kind of bad materials in Antarctica. And it's all about research, scientific research and peace in Antarctica. So I just think that's really cool. And you can look up the details of this, and I really think you'll find it fascinating. And then the second thing, and I was thinking about this not too long ago, is how many children, how many babies have ever been born in Antarctica? Have you ever thought about that? The short answer is 11. There's been 11 babies born. And the interesting thing about this is it goes back to the 1950s when all of the countries, these different countries were trying to drive stakes in the ground. The 2 most aggressive were Argentina and Chile. So what the government in Argentina did is they sent a pregnant woman over to Antarctica to give birth. She gave birth in Argentina, and that was to bolster their claim for territory in Argentina. So what did Chile do? A year later, Chile sent a couple over to Antarctica to conceive and give birth to a baby. So anyway, so since then, there's been 9 more babies born in Antarctica. Again, this is all research stations and I guess research personnel. And here's the other interesting fact, is trivia about Antarctica and children, is all 7 babies born in Antarctica have survived. And so Antarctica, of all the 7 continents, has the lowest infant mortality rate in the world. And when you think about 11 born, and then you compare that to our other 6 continents, there's no close second. Yeah. So anyway, it was just interesting things, and I could spend out. I mean, it's just incredible the things about Antarctica that you'll, when you really dig into it, you find out about that are so interesting. It's such an unusual place. So I've talked, and now could we go ahead and show the 3 minutes, that MP4 file that I put together, and really that's all I have for tonight. And you guys are really going to be impressed with what follows with Becky. I guarantee you.
Thank you, Jesse.
Okay.
responsible for TBN. It is God's voice spoken into existence. We steward it in our generation. That's all we're doing. Okay? What that means is when it was our turn, there was 3 or 4 months we were a little confused. I remember in this building going into a conference room, and before pausing into an important meeting, I would say, I pause at the door and say, Lord, be with me, you know, Holy Spirit, no way, Dad, like, you know, and I didn't know who I needed, you know, at the time. I don't know why I thought that, but it was just something that I was going through personally.
All
So
right,
I was wondering if I was supposed to embark Paul and Jan. Was like, now they're in heaven, are they looking over? And am I supposed to do what they were going to do in this meeting? I had a nighttime dream.
Cheryl, mute your mic.
Again, very nice, Jesse. Sorry about the audio interruption there.
Yeah, I was wondering who was talking, but
I wondered, like, is that part of the music or what's going on here?
you know, like somebody had a recording on, but no. So again, hey, that was my experience. And, you know, again, I'm a beginner. Okay. I'm a novice on this. I had 2 days And now we're going to have a seasoned Antarctica expert follow me.
Okay, thank you. So Becky Schott will now do her presentation. Everybody welcome her. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Hey, everyone. Of course, now my phone's ringing and there's like all kinds of craziness happening. That'll stop in a minute. Apparently FedEx really wants me. So I just wanted to say thank you, especially to Jesse for recommending me to do this talk tonight. And those were beautiful images. And for all the challenges that we had for only, I would have called it 1 day and 1 hour there in Antarctica. I think you really nailed it. You got some really beautiful, seriously, some really beautiful images and really captured the beauty of Antarctica. And usually what I tell everybody is, you think Antarctica is a once in a lifetime destination, and it's not. I'm already planning my 4th trip there this coming February, my 4th and 5th, and then 2024, my 6th and 7th trip back there. Polar fever is a real thing. So you can't just go to Antarctica once. So Jesse, I think you're gonna have to come back. All right, let me do my screen share here. Oops, oh no. All right. So like I mentioned, I've been to Antarctica several times, and I'm definitely going to talk about that and some of the photography opportunities and a lot of the really incredible things there. But before I go into that, I was asked to do a quick introduction. For those of you who don't know me or my work, I do underwater photography and photography for a living, professional underwater photographer. I write for about 6 or 7 different magazines. Recently, you can see an article I did about Antarctica in Alert Diver magazine, and Scuba Diving magazine just released an article as well. And then I did some recent articles for Dive Master, a German magazine, and some French magazines as well. So you can see my work pretty avidly in a lot of the diving magazines. I also do work for Smithsonian and several other magazines. I teach technical diving, usually just rebreathers these days when I have time, all the way through trimix, and I run trips around the world. So some of the most recent shoots that I've had, I was working with Ocean Gate, which is, they made this new submarine that actually just went down to Titanic this month, taking one of my really good friends with it. So that's pretty exciting. I got to shoot the testing of it for Smithsonian magazine. I just got back from the Great Lakes. My dive trip report was I just did 30 200-foot dives this month. So in about 28 days, it was a lot of diving, but I was shooting the wrecks of the Great Lakes. It's one of my favorite places to dive and shoot shipwrecks because of the cold preserved wrecks there in the lakes. And I did a shoot for NHK, shooting bacteria, not as exciting, but they wanted bacteria in 6K resolution. So I could do that for them. And then in November, I was diving in Alaska. I've been doing a lot of work for Seiko watches and shooting some cave stuff for them as well. So you can find my work all over the place, and documentaries as well, but there haven't been as many of those lately. And one of my personal pet projects that I've really enjoyed doing over the last couple of years is photogrammetry, which is a whole nother talk, but I just want to at least like introduce it or throw it in there because I do a lot of this 3D modeling, and it's just been an absolute passion of mine lately. I've been doing it on coral reefs, in caves, on shipwrecks, and it's just absolutely a blast. So if you want to see any of that, you can go to this website called Sketchfab and just type in my name, Becky Kagan Schott, and the 3D models come up. But it's really neat process. And for those photographers out there that want to try it, all you need is like a GoPro. I mean, you can do it with a really high-end DSLR, but a GoPro works just as well. So it's a lot of fun. So sort of a pet project. So I dive all over the world. I mean, I've been everywhere: Fiji, Australia, Croatia in October. But ice diving has become one of my absolute favorite types of diving. And I grew up in Florida. I was a warm water diver. I used to think anything colder than 67 degrees was the Arctic. And now I'm diving in the Arctic and Antarctica every year almost. So I have fallen in love with ice diving, and I do a lot of it here in the States as well. And I never thought I would like it. But what I like about it is that, first of all, it's challenging. I mean, you've got to learn, like Jesse said, the dry suit and the equipment, and you're wearing a lot of weight and what undergarments fit you, and you're wearing dry gloves, and all of that might sound intimidating for people that don't do cold water. But I liked the challenge of getting used to all of those things. And then obviously then adding the camera to the mix as well. Ice is a really interesting environment. I grew up as a cave diver in Florida as well, and I enjoy overhead environments. And ice sort of reminds me of caves a little bit, except for the fact that it's always changing. I mean, icebergs are constantly melting and flipping and breaking off, and they're just constantly changing. So you can't dive the same iceberg twice. So I really like that. You see unique wildlife around ice, like penguins and polar bears and seals, depending on what pole you're at. And I love the sense of adventure that comes along with it. I used to think there was only one kind of ice diving, but there's a lot of different kinds of ice diving. So there's cutting a hole in the ice using a chainsaw and just diving like into a lake or into a glacier, what I was doing in Alaska in November. I mean, we actually dived inside of a glacier. That was kind of crazy. And then there's iceberg diving, and then there's brash ice, which are like chunks of icebergs that create all these like small car sized pieces of ice to football sized pieces of ice. So tons of different kinds of ice, different shapes, and all different types. So I absolutely like ice diving. So one of the best places in the world to go ice diving is Antarctica. So to get there, as Jesse mentioned as well, it's easy enough, but it's not super easy. You fly down to Ushuaia, Argentina, and you get on an expedition vessel and you cross the Drake Passage. The Drake Passage is known to be one of the worst seas on the planet. And you get something either called the Drake Shake or the Drake Lake. So I've been to Antarctica 3 times now, and I'm about 50-50. I've had the Drake Lake twice, kind of 2.5 times, and the other 2.5 I'd say was the Shake. What I consider the Shake, we had 30-foot seas my first time there, both directions, 30 foot. It was insane. The second time I went, it was like 5-foot seas, nothing. I mean, the boat barely moved. And then this last time, I don't remember exactly, maybe Jesse, you remember, I think it was like 20-foot seas, something like that, 15s to 20. It was, there was a little bit of shake in there. So this was a shot from our trip in January. So you can see how violent those seas can get. I usually do get pretty seasick, but I have not been seasick, knock on wood, on any of our Antarctic trips. So I also think of this as sort of a, like, I don't know, you need to do it. You need to endure it, and you need to go through it in order to get to Antarctica and just appreciate the calmness. It's like going through a portal into another planet. And then once the seas die down, the fog parts, and then you just start to see these icebergs come into view, and it is like stepping into another planet. It's magical, you know, as the ice starts to float by and you start to see marine life. In one day you can get fog and sun and snow, and the weather just keeps changing. It's really, really wild. I think that last shot I took, and then like an hour later the sun's out, and when the sun comes out you start to see all the blue and the teal and all the beautiful colors in the ice, which is really magical. And as you keep traveling deeper into Antarctica, you just keep coming across more and more ice, and then you start to see different kinds of animals on the ice. You start seeing penguins. This is a little group of Gentoo penguins just hanging out on a passing iceberg. Gentoo penguins are one of the fastest penguins in the world. They can swim up to about 25 miles per hour. And the first time I went, it was just wild. I have my long lens on and I'm just like swinging like crazy trying to get these penguins, because they don't just jump straight. Like they'll just kind of go all these different directions. So as a photographer, it kind of drives you insane because you're trying to focus, and the penguins are just jumping in so many different directions, but absolutely beautiful animals. And then you start to come across different kinds of seals. You'll see Weddell seals. This is a crab eater seal. You'll see leopard seals, all kinds of seals just floating out on the icebergs. And then there's whales. Most common you'll see is humpback. And the first time somebody sees a whale, everybody runs out onto the boat deck and everyone's excited, and that's all great. And it's probably pretty far away. And by the time a trip is over, unless the whale is like right next to the boat, nobody's outside anymore. But the whales really do come right up next to the boat. This was pretty close to our Zodiac ride a couple years ago in 2020. But these big whales will just come up right next to the Zodiacs, and they're not afraid of you, which is one of the things I find most fascinating about Antarctica, is that the marine life whether it's a seal, penguin, whale, most of it is just not afraid of you at all. So I really, really enjoy that. So for me, this trip that we were just on in January was a special shoot. I was there for Seiko Watches doing shooting a new collection of watches for them that were called Save the Seas, and they were ocean and glacier inspired. So the people that designed the watches were inspired by the different shades of glacial ice, and so they really wanted us to shoot in Antarctica. And so this was actually a trip that was planned for us in 2021, and then it got moved to 2022, and then we weren't even sure if it would happen in 2022. So for me, the pressure was certainly on for this because having 12 watches to shoot and then our trip getting cut into, I call it 1 day and 1 hour, was pretty stressful. And I not only was the photographer, but I'm also in the images as well for them. So I had to bring along a photographer with me, and let's just say it was a 3-figure shoot. And it was, I was sweating a lot, even in Antarctica, trying to get everything done that we needed to do. But it was very successful on our end. So we got everything we needed and everyone's very happy. But it was like one of the most amazing things to happen. This was in 2020, yes, something amazing happened in 2020. I went to Antarctica in February and then everything else was downhill. Sorry, bad joke. But we were in a Zodiac, and about 30 crab eater seals just surfaced like out of nowhere from the depths. And these crab eater seals were just swimming along right by the icebergs. And it was really an incredible sight. And it just couldn't be more picturesque. Everywhere you put your camera in Antarctica, it just looks like a postcard. It's really, really beautiful. So one of the common questions that everybody has is, will I see a penguin? And you kind of chuckle because you go, yes, you will see millions of penguins, and you'll see chinstrap penguin colonies, gentoo penguin colonies. We'll come across Adelie penguin colonies. There's a lot of different kinds of penguins in Antarctica. And depending on the time of year that you go, you can see, you'll sometimes just see more penguins on land or breeding. The time of year we were there, the eggs should have been hatching, but we were probably just a little bit early. So there weren't like any, not that I saw, I didn't see any chicks yet. But my other 2 trips to Antarctica, I've gone in February, not January. And there's always been baby penguins. So depending on the time of year you go, it can be a pretty exciting time there. One of the coolest things about penguins that I never knew until I started going to Antarctica was that they actually have this like little claw, or they have little claws at the end of their webbed feet. They're very good climbers, and they can just take that claw and just hop up the side of an iceberg or up the side of an ice wall, and they just kind of grasp into the ice. And it's really incredible to watch. Sometimes they fall down and they go rolling down, take out a couple other penguins with them. But in general, they're just really, really incredible. They like high places, kind of like cats, and they'll climb up they're pretty determined little birds. They can climb up rock faces and icebergs. This is one of my favorite shots. I took this on my first trip to Antarctica, and I feel like it's not an underwater shot, but it captures Antarctica. Like as Jesse was saying, you see these fjords and the ice and the glaciers and just the quiet peacefulness of the 7th continent. And it's the least explored continent on Earth, and it's so peaceful and a very delicate place. So I kind of feel like that captures how special it is. So the diving in Antarctica, we consider this expedition style diving, and the trips that we run out there, we want to make sure that everybody can enjoy themselves to the fullest. So we ask that you have dry suit certification and at least 40 dives in a dry suit before going to Antarctica. And that's also for safety, but it's also so you can hopefully enjoy the diving to its fullest, because you don't want to go and then trying to be figuring out a dry suit when you're already in Antarctica and you've spent a lot of money to get there. So it's better to do it ahead of time, get the diving practice in, get used to the dry suit, and then go. The other reason we call it expedition style diving is because sometimes we don't exactly know what the dive site is. It's sometimes places that we've been before, sometimes there's too much ice, we can't go to places we've been before, so we just pick a new spot and we don't know exactly what's down there. So it could be a rock wall full of really cool things to shoot macro wise. You might get penguins or seals that come by. It's sometimes a big question mark. So there's not a lot that can be told about the site. The other thing about expedition diving is there's no dive master there. I mean, there's a guy that's called a dive master running the Zodiac, but they're mostly there to fill the tanks and kind of help get the gear out of the water. They don't really do much of anything else. So your buddy has to help you like get into your gear, make sure your tanks are on, like just get everything ready to go. And then everybody generally splashes at once and does the dive. We limit the depth to 60 feet. And that's because you are in a very remote place. There's no chambers. We're not diving nitrox or anything. So you don't want anybody to get hurt. And we don't dive rebreathers in Antarctica because the dive guide or the Zodiac driver needs to be able to see the bubbles so he can watch where the divers are headed. And so, I mean, to be honest, most of the best, I wouldn't even say diving I've done in Antarctica, the best in water time that I've had in Antarctica has all been snorkeling. So even though the diving is really, really cool, I have had better experiences in the snorkel zone because if you think about it, everything that's great is in the snorkel zone. You can dive, can snorkel in icebergs. For me, I've seen leopard seals in the snorkel zone, penguins, other kinds of seals. So I really like snorkeling. And it's much less gear, much less stuff to take with you. So this was taken on our trip in January. You can see the big Seiko watch there. So we were getting our shots on the Zodiac when we were out for our 1 20-minute dive of the day. But it was certainly a beautiful spot. The little bay that they chose had really clear water. And I'm told that our group was the first group to actually dive in Antarctica since it closed down in 2020. So that's also pretty exciting. So the different gear that you need there, obviously the dry suit, dry gloves, the water temperature is sometimes 28 degrees to around 34 degrees. Seawater can get cold, really colder than 32. So I've seen 28, 29 degrees several times in certain areas. You are diving in ice water. Then we dive single steel tanks, usually with an H valve. So you'll have 2 regulators, one on each side. So if you get a free flow, which does happen, you can shut one off and breathe off of the other regulator. But again, we're not terribly deep, so we can just come up to the surface. I do use heated undergarments to keep myself warm, which is pretty nice. They don't keep you hot, but they keep you warm enough, which is pretty cool. So diving icebergs, there's a little bit of science to it. When you're picking an iceberg, generally they like you to dive icebergs that are grounded because that means that the iceberg can't suddenly flip. They also like it if you try to dive an iceberg, and they'll usually pick one for you, an iceberg that's more rounded on top. So you can see this one isn't really rounded. This has a bigger area. So if a piece of this iceberg were to break off, it might become unsteady and the whole iceberg could flip if it's not grounded. So generally a grounded iceberg and one that is pretty round on top or pretty flat and featureless is the type of ice that we're going to try to dive, just so pieces don't break off and no dangerous things happen. So once you jump off or really fall off the side of the Zodiac into the water, your first thought is, God, this is weird. Like I should be in Fiji, not falling off into like ice water at the bottom of the planet. And then your cheeks kind of go a little bit numb from the cold. And then once you start to look around, you just stop thinking about the cold altogether. I do, at least. I just start looking around at the ice. And once you start diving the icebergs, as you go down, like they're just silky, and you can see all the air bubbles that have frozen inside the ice. And it's really, really pretty. They kind of sparkle when the sun is out. And a challenge for me is I've always been trying to get that like perfect image of an iceberg. The way I see it with my own eyes, I really can't capture it on camera. You just have to see it and take it all in with your own eyes, I think. But I'll keep trying. But they're just, the way they look, they're like translucent, and sometimes they have a mirror effect. It's just, ice is a really, really cool, literally cool thing to shoot. So this is a shot of me on one of the icebergs that we were diving, and this is around 50 feet deep. And it was a really, really neat iceberg. This was on our trip. And you can also see the different camera equipment I'm using. I'm using a Nikon D850 and an Aquatica housing, and I have Einon Z240 strobes. And I've now added a monitor to my system as well for shooting video. But that's my regular system, and I've shot everything on the icebergs lens wise, from 16 millimeter to I think I had a 16 to 35 in my camera on this dive because I wasn't sure what we were going to see. So I kind of took a lens that was kind of a range for this particular day. And this is what I got. So looking up from the bottom, like from around probably 40 feet there, you can kind of see some of how translucent the ice is, and then just these beautiful like kind of rivets in it, and that's from the melting. So when the ice melts, it kind of creates these divots, and then the iceberg flips, and then it melts some more, and it keeps kind of just flipping and creating these really interesting features in the ice. This is a dive buddy of mine. I mean, it looks like an ice wall. That's the only way I can describe diving one of these big icebergs, is you're just swimming along and it's just a big ice wall. And it's very, very unique. This was a grounded iceberg that we dived in 2020. So you can see how it's, my dive buddy is just above the ground, and the iceberg was actually sitting on the ground itself. So this was only in 25 feet of water, so it wasn't very deep. And this is a different one. Just I had actually had a free flow this day, and I turned my tank off and came up, and I just asked the dive guide if I could just hang out on the surface and shoot over under shots, and he was like, sure, no problem. And he was kind of motoring around following the divers and the bubbles, and I just hung out there and turned a bad situation of a free flow into a good situation and decided to shoot some over unders. We were lucky because it was a nice sunny day. So this is a different kind of ice. So this is the brash ice, and it's what it looks like on the surface, and it looks really cool. It's kind of these, like, I don't know, anywhere from a car-sized chunk of ice down to a refrigerator size, down to a, I don't know, volleyball. I mean, all these different, so smaller pieces. You can't really call them an iceberg, but they're just growlers and bergy bits. And when I look out and see these bergy bits of ice, the first thing I think is leopard seal. This is where they like to hunt. This is where they like to hunt penguins. So I get really excited when I see like that kind of brash ice. And so this was from our trip in January. Just as we set out to go find the perfect iceberg to dive, maybe 5 minutes after we left the boat, we saw a leopard seal on a piece of ice, and we're like, oh, let's just go take a look. And as we were looking at that leopard seal sitting on the piece of ice, we noticed that there was one in the water, and it zipped around our boat a few times. And the guide, or the driver, Henrik, was like, do you want to get in with it? I'm like, yes, I want to get in with it. And he's like, yeah, okay, go for it. I'm like, great. So leopard seals are one of the apex predators of Antarctica. You do have to be very just cautious, because like any big animal, like it would be like if you're diving with a shark, you just have to read its body language and make sure that it's a player, and that it's not aggressively coming towards you and opening its mouth or trying to bite you or drag you under. This one that we saw was maybe around 7 feet. So it was fairly big, but they do get a lot bigger than this. So as my mom would say, oh, it's so cute. And yes, they are cute. And it really doesn't look super vicious in these photos. It was definitely a cute leopard seal, and it hung out with us for about an hour, which was really fantastic. I couldn't have asked for a nicer encounter if we only had a short period of time to be in the water. And this was a shot from 2020, actually, where we had a different leopard seal that I was really excited about being in the water with. And this one was a 90-minute encounter with this leopard seal. And what was cool about this one was that it's really hard to get these shots. Like if you notice, there's ice like all above the leopard seal's head, all across the top of the image. I'm snorkeling, and all I'm doing is I look like probably a dead penguin on the surface as I'm flopping around in the ice. Ice is hitting me in the head. I'm trying to push the camera through the ice, and it's get caught up in the arms and the strobes, and it's very, very awkward. And on my side, it does not look pretty at all. And then on top of that, you're in 29-degree water, and all this ice, it's still melting. And when it melts, it like little bubbles come off of it, and all those little bubbles like to stick to your dome port. Perfect. So you're like constantly wiping your dome port off. You're kicking ice, they're hitting you in the head, and then you're looking down at this really fast moving apex predator that's below you, trying to make sure it doesn't just sneak up behind you or try to pull on your fins. So that's the story behind the shot in getting a shot like this. So I decided, I was really close to the iceberg that's behind the leopard seal, and then I was just getting so much fizz on so many bubbles on my camera lens, and the shots looks blurry because the icebergs they're melting and they're creating this little halocline there. So there's this blurry layer of fresh and salt water that's mixing by the iceberg. So I just got fed up and I'm like, I'm moving like 20 feet away from this little iceberg chunk. And I just hung out there. I decided I'm going to park myself here. Yes, I want to constantly be moving around looking for the leopard seal, but I like that ice in the background, and eventually it's going to swim in front of me. And patience paid off because I sat there very patiently waiting for the leopard seal to hopefully just swim in front of me, and eventually it did. So very, very happy and pretty proud of that shot. And I had a flooded dry suit. So this is why my mom goes, "Oh, they're so cute." I'm like, "Yes, mom, but yeah, as they open their mouth, yeah, not as cute." They can actually open their mouths around 180 degrees, and the mouths are full of sharp penguin destroying teeth. So that's a leopard seal. Here's another shot of one on the surface, and one of my first dives in 2020. I get in the water with my group and I'm very excited. I'm like, yay, we all made it to Antarctica. We got in the water for our checkout dive, and all we saw were like 8 dead penguins. And at first I thought, wow, this is not the first dive that I wanted to show everybody, like, welcome to Antarctica, here's dead penguins. And then I realized, oh God, there's a leopard seal around us somewhere if there's all these dead penguins. But that's when we saw these guys sitting up on the ice after the dive. So there was a bunch of very, very full leopard seals after demolishing some penguins. Here's a picture of the one that came up behind us on the boat. So other types of diving you can do in Antarctica, there's really interesting walls that have all kinds of really, really cool things. Above the water, Antarctica can be very monochrome. It can be very black and white, gray, but then underwater, there is so much color. Very, very beautiful, like different kinds of green and red kelp. You'll see fish and marine life in the kelp, sea stars, really normal looking ones like that to really abnormal looking ones with like a bazillion arms. I honestly don't know what the names of these are. I have to look them up, but there's some very bizarre looking critters. So if you're into macro, I'm not. This is about as macro as I get. This was with a 14 millimeter, a 14 to 24 fisheye. I'm sorry, not fisheye, 14 to 24 rectilinear lens. And I got like 6 inches from it, and it was pretty close. So if you're into macro, there's a lot of really weird macro stuff in Antarctica. There's also some other, I love the wide angle. I like wide angle photography. I usually take my fisheye and a 14 to 24 rectilinear. And this particular dive, we were on a whale, it was where a whaling station was, and then they would dump the whale bones off the side, and they would kind of slide down the wall. And there's several different places like this in Antarctica to basically dive like a whale bone graveyard, and you'll see all types of mostly humpback whale bones. There's also wreck diving in Antarctica, and there's, really interesting history with the science stations, and there's old whaling stations you can visit, places like that. One of my favorite things to do, though, is walk the shoreline. So you get the chance, you go diving, and then they usually take you to shore just so you can experience shore a little bit. I usually like to do 1 dive a day and then skip the second dive and just go to shore and shoot penguins and seals and not miss the land activities, because there's so much to see on land. And I think it's really special to sit there like among the penguins. On this particular day, it was towards the end of a trip, and I really wanted this over-under shot of a penguin. And so I just decided to stay in my dry suit and go out and snorkel around in the really shallow water with the penguins. And I found that that's a really great place. If you're patient, get them kind of coming right off the beach and zipping down into the water. And I also found that they really didn't like video lights, and that strobes were a much better option, because if I just kind of hung out there for a while, you'd get used to me and then just ignore you and start just zipping by. So I got some. What's that? Oh.
I didn't mute.
Oh gosh, I thought somebody had said something. So, and then I also saw a crab eater seal one year, just came right up on shore. This was only in like 3 feet of water. I was standing. It was chest deep. I actually didn't even have a mask on. And I saw this big shadow just approached me underwater, and I just stuck my camera down in the water and started shooting. It wasn't until later that I actually could look at the pictures and see it was a crab eater seal. So that was pretty neat. So the shoreline is a really great place to experience wildlife and kind of getting different kinds of seals, fur seals, crab eater, weddell coming in and out of the water as well. And this was the shot I ended up with just after hanging out, trying to get over-unders with the penguins going by. Let's see. So also, for any of you who have a long lens, somebody will laugh at this, I'm sure. So my very first trip to Antarctica in 2018, I invested in a 600mm lens. So I was like, I'm getting the 600mm. They say you have to stay 10 feet away from penguins, and I want really close-up shots. Well, nobody told the penguins they had to stay 10 feet away from us. So the penguins, they'll just waddle right by you. They'll come up to you. They'll start picking at the zippers on your pants. They'll start stealing your stuff if you leave it on the ground too long. They are really, really funny little birds. And so I found that 600mm lens, it was great for whales, but it really did nothing for penguins. So here it is, I'm toting around a 10-pound lens. And I mean, I got some good shots with it, but it's more of a better polar bear lens, I'll call it now, versus bringing it to Antarctica. So I no longer bring that lens to Antarctica. I'll bring a 80 to 400 with me. It's a much better lens for down there. Plus, the focal distance is much shorter on that one. Yeah, the penguins are really, they're characters. I'm not a big bird person, but I fell in love with penguins. They've got personality. They will look at you and just kind of like whatever and waddle right on by. They fall down, they pick themselves back up again and shake it off and just keep on going. So you'll see penguin fights. You see them stealing rocks out of some penguins' nests and stealing it for their nest. They're just really, really funny. They're really funny birds. They even try to steal your tripods if you leave them around too long. They're funny. So what does it take to visit Antarctica or the Arctic, either place? Arctic is my next destination. Actually, I'm leaving in 2 weeks for my 6th trip to the Arctic. So it's going to be pretty awesome, hopefully. But time, obviously, most Antarctica trips, you want to plan at least 2 weeks. Most of the trips, I call them gateway trips, but they're about 10 days long in total. But that's 2 days to cross the Drake Passage each way. So that's only 6 days in Antarctica, because 4 of those days you're going to be in the Drake Passage. So 10 days is I would say the shortest trip that you do to Antarctica, just to get your feet wet. And then there's longer trips that are 3 and 4 week long trips that you start to go, wow, I really need to spend more time in this place. But you do need the time. And obviously they are not cheap trips, but they are worth, I think, every single penny, because it's an amazing place to go. And no matter how many times you go, you'll see something new each time. And for me personally, like if I have a good time in a place, I sometimes wonder if the second or third or fourth trip will be just as good as that first trip. And I've found that every single trip is unique in some way and really special. So even our January trip, where we only got a very short time, it was one of the nicest days I've ever had in Antarctica. I mean, literally in one day, I had an hour in the water with a leopard seal. I got to dive in an iceberg and then spend 3 hours on land shooting with penguins. And it was the most ice I've ever seen as well. So I just thought it was a really, really special trip. The right gear obviously is important, and doing workup dives in cold water. So again, I grew up in Florida, so I do a lot more cold water diving now, but you can do it, and it is entirely worth it. But here's a tip for you. If you just snorkel in Antarctica, you need no dry suit experience at all, but I'd still recommend getting dry suit experience before you go. It's definitely rewarding. You'll see some really incredible things. You meet really great people on these trips. That's how I met Jesse. And you might even get a little shot of Shackleton whiskey with a piece of an iceberg that they drag in. So it's a very special place. Shameless promotion here, but we are going back in 2024, and we do have open spots in 2024. These trips do fill up years in advance, so it's something you want to think about. The average cost, you're looking at somewhere around $13,000 to $14,000 for like about $1,000 a day. Let's put it that way. So say a 14-day trip, about $14,000 plus your airfare. But So hopefully that gives you an idea of what it is. But if you're interested, you can definitely email me or we can talk more if you would like to visit Antarctica. So how do you contact me? My website, Liquid Productions. You can also look at different trips I've got going on at megdiver.com or follow me on social media. My Instagram, I post a lot there, and on Facebook. So yeah, Antarctica, to me, not a once in a lifetime destination. I never thought when I grew up in Florida and I was shooting down at the Blue Heron Bridge when I was 12, 13 years old and diving off of Pompano and the Keys, if you would have told me I would be ice diving at all, let alone in Antarctica, I would have said, you're crazy. I'm never going to do something like that. So life has a funny way of changing things on you sometimes. And now one of the trips that I look forward to most, next to the Great Lakes every year, is going to Antarctica. So I hope you'll look into it and check it out. Check it out for yourself someday.
You unmute everybody now. Do we have any questions? First of all, I wanted to thank Becky very much for, well, a very unusual and beautiful talk. Obviously, you are a student of where you've been, and it comes across. I wanted to thank you very much. Questions from anybody?
Are there any scientific bases that you can see when you go on land?
Are there any scientific bases you can see down there?
Yes, absolutely. We visited the Argentinian base, the Chilean base, and there's, it's not a base anymore, I don't think, but Port Lockroy, it's the UK, it's in part of Antarctica where the UK owns, or not owns that part, but they have a post office basically. So you can actually mail a postcard from Antarctica. But yeah, we've visited two of the bases there, which is pretty interesting. I mean, they stay there for 4 to 6 months at a time, and it's got to get pretty interesting.
Anybody else?
How many hours a day like do you have, like January or February?
So January, February, you have, that's their summer, right? So it does get dark, but not until maybe 10 o'clock at night. And then the sun comes up around 3 in the morning. So maybe 5 hours of darkness in like January, if I remember correctly.
What does the sun maybe get about 15, 20 degrees over the horizon, maybe?
So like when we're going to the Arctic in 2 weeks, the sun won't go down at all. Like we're going to have, it'll be the midnight sun. So it'll be almost 24 hours of daylight, but we did get, it does turn into night when we're there in January, February. I mean, I would say maybe 5 hours of darkness, and it is completely dark.
Anybody else?
We have a question.
Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, do you take advantage of any of the other opportunities when you go that far south? You know, my family's from Argentina, so they're like, you know, Peninsula Valdez for the marine mammals there, or Punta Tumba for their big penguin colony, or maybe the Glacier National Park.
So I've spent a little bit of time in Patagonia, but all of the other places you've mentioned, I think you're going to have to give me a list. I'm gonna have to look that up, but no, I've mostly, because these Antarctic trips are so big, I've spent about a week in Patagonia, but it's tough to kind of piggyback them together.
Becky, I want to thank you for a wonderful presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
I'm a warm water wimp, so I could only do this virtually with you.
I was in Bonaire in April and I forgot what warm water felt like. Oh my God, it was wonderful. And it was so weird to not wear gloves. I mean, I felt like I was missing something. It was great.
Somebody else had a question.
I was just gonna ask about the air temperatures that time of year.
The air temperatures anywhere from, I wouldn't consider it terribly cold. Now I live in Pennsylvania now, but it's somewhere around, you can plan on 25 to 40 degrees, but I'd say you're averaging around 30 degrees. So cold enough to where it's snowing, but sometimes it doesn't stick.
When you're down there, you don't have protection on your face. Just how cold does your face get?
Oh, in the water?
Yeah.
Oh, I think I'm abnormal. I don't really feel it anymore. It used to feel like numb, or like when you go to the dentist and get Novocaine, like it kind of tingles and then it just goes numb. But I really don't feel it anymore. It's
Back in the 1990s and 2000 area, Norbert Wu, do you know him
yeah,
or of him? Is he still diving?
I don't know. I actually haven't seen him in a long time. It's been years.
Okay. I've kind of lost track of him. He came and gave a presentation for HUPS years and years ago.
Very nice. I remember seeing him at DEMA maybe 5 or 6 years ago, but I think that was the last time I've seen him.
So Becky, I actually have a question. At the beginning of your presentation, you spoke about the geometry.
Oh, photogrammetry.
Photogrammetry, thank you. And you mentioned a website. Can you give that information to us again, please?
Yeah, so the website is called Sketchfab, SKETCHFAB, sketchfab.com. And then just look up my name, all one word, Becky Kagan Schott. And it's a site that you can upload your 3D models to. And if anyone has a VR headset, you can actually do like a virtual dive on the shipwreck, or even just on your computer, or phone, just move it around and you can see every angle of the shipwreck from above it to underneath of it, zoom in and see details. And I love it. I'm kind of geeking out on the technology because it's a really great way to bring shipwrecks to life, share them with people. You'll never see, unless it's crazy clear water, you'll never see a shipwreck in its entirety unless you do some of these 3D models. And it's neat because you can see all the artifacts, how the shipwreck is breaking down over the years. And just, I don't know, I love it. It's a really fun tool.
Becky, technically, as far as being able to generate that photogrammic, I'm probably screwing it up, but you're taking multiple shots all around and then somehow molding them together into an overall structure, 3D
Correct.
structure, I guess.
Yeah, so you're taking, you can do anything from, if it was a small object, you do anything from 30 or 40 images all the way to that last one that I showed you, the side wheeler with the side wheels, that was 5,000 images. But you don't even need like a DSLR. I'm doing it with a DSLR, but even a GoPro. So basically just time lapse. If you use an interval timer, swim around an object, shoot it from all sides and then over the top of it. And then a software program called Agisoft will stitch it together. And you go through several steps on the program. It takes me 3 or 4 days to actually, of my computer working, to process one of these models. But it stitches it together if you've overlapped them correctly, and it creates the 3D model. So it's pretty amazing. It's a little, I don't know, boring at the time, like while you're shooting them, because you're just sort of like aimlessly swimming around, just trying to shoot every inch of the shipwreck or whatever you're shooting. And then, you correct the images and then put them into the software. But it's neat to see these models that are generated from your dives. And it's really, I think it's going to help archaeologists in the future, and even forensics dive teams are using them to like shoot an area and be able to go back and kind of virtually see it later on.
About how accurate are the dimensions?
So they can be very accurate. I'm doing mine more for art, but if I started putting in, I could start putting in like basically rulers so that you could actually do like exact measurements and geo-referencing and stuff like that. So they can be very exact.
Thank you.
So I've been trying to get a word in edgewise here. So Becky, I really enjoyed your presentation. It reminded me of being in the Army in Alaska in the 90s. So we used to call it cold, cuss word cold, and really cuss word cold. And I see some really cuss word cold stuff in your photos. As far as the photogrammetry, have you heard about NERF yet?
NERF?
Yeah, so NVIDIA I saw something come across my email just last week. NVIDIA has a new rapid photogrammetry API that they've released. You can download the software. It's NERF. And basically it will take a smaller subset of images. What I saw was done with a drone, but you could do it with scuba cameras or land cameras, and it will, you have to build the environment on your computer. So there's a little bit of geekiness that goes on, but you can give it a set of images and it will rapidly build a model, and it's worth checking out because it's not as photo accurate, but I don't think the images you showed, I mean, we're not going for Matterport here. So I think building a rapid model would be good. The other thing I wanted to share is if you're not trying to get 3D models out of it and you've got like flat photos, Photoshop has a really good ability to link 2D images. You can give it a whole set of images in a directory and say, marry these. And so that's really good for like archaeology. If you wanted to map like an ocean floor scene where you're going to keep your depth at say 20 feet, swim back and forth in a grid over the site, you can take all those small 2D images into Photoshop and I forget the command's like merge or something. It'll stitch them together based on common points, similar to photogrammetry, but without
I've
making
used that for like panoramics before, I believe. The same. Yeah.
I've done some of that stuff with drones, but it's the same I mean, this is all the same concept.
Well, thank you for the nerf.com. I will definitely check that out. And by the way, I was in Alaska in November. It was -15 degrees when we were diving, and that was beep, beep, beep cold. Our dry suits were literally frozen. The hood was frozen to my head the second I got out of the water.
Down to zero is one mark, 0 to -30 is another, -30 to -60 is another, and below everything below -60 is several cuss words. And you know when you get to -60 because you spit and it bounces.
Oh, wow. I do not want to get to that spot. My eyelashes were frozen together.
Yeah.
And our gear was breaking like crazy. And I was like, you know, I've done a lot of ice diving, but I have now learned what my gear can handle. And it's nothing colder than -15 because like the dry suit was frozen shut. I couldn't even vent the BC inflator. It was all cold. Ice was actively forming on my dome port. Like I had to keep wiping the ice off the dome port. It was insane.
Well, you got to be careful because the acrylic gets really brittle when it gets super cold like that.
Yeah. No, luckily that didn't. Luckily the acrylic stayed intact. But yeah, it was really cold. We actually had to take a helicopter out onto the ice, and it was pretty extreme. So my hat's off to you for working in those temperatures.
I don't miss that kind of cold.
I was doing it for fun. That is really cold. When your eyebrows and your eyelashes are freezing together, it's just there's something wrong about that.
That's why I'm with the rest of the group where I'm like, yeah, Rotan, Cozumel, is it bathwater warm? Okay, I can get in it.
Yeah, I mean, in Bonaire, it was like 79, and I was wearing a 3 mil, and I was freezing. I probably was colder there than I was in Antarctica. I'm bringing a 5 mil. Jesse, I have to thank you for your baby fact. I have never heard that, and my mind is kind of blown. So yeah, learn something new every day. I don't know what possessed you to think about that, but
I wonder if they had any Antarctica passports or something that they were contemplating.
Yeah.
I just kind of stumbled across that, but I was checking out some other aspect of Antarctica and online just, a week or so ago, and I stumbled across that and I thought, that is crazy.
I've never even heard that. And now I think I'm going to ask everybody I know who's been to Antarctica if they know the answer to that. I would have said 0. I would have been like, no babies are born there. Like, no. Like I wouldn't have thought you'd be allowed to go to Antarctica pregnant. Or I mean, yeah.
I know. Well, that's the other thing. This harsh environment that everybody thinks of. 11 babies born, no problem. They all lived.
I hope one of the passengers on that trip was the doctor.
Well, I don't know whether I guess their birth certificates or they went back to the country they came from, because there is no such thing as a passport from Antarctica, right? I was born in Antarctica,
Did they punch your passport book with a
No,
with a
there's-
sticker?
No, there is no pass, no.
No.
Now in Port Lockroy, the UK British station that's there, they will stamp it, but it's actually not, you're not supposed to do that because it's not real. There is no stamp for Antarctica. There's no, it's not a country.
So you didn't have to go through customs.
No, it's great.
Global entry,
Just
huh?
sail on through. You just got to get through the Drake Passage. You get through those 30-foot seas, you're good to go.
Yeah, that would be the seasick kid for me. Oh,
It's kind of like big rollers. You just sort of like go one way and then just sort of roll the other way. Yeah, watch, you go to eat and I don't know, Jesse, did you experience this? Like you go to eat and like all of a sudden like the boat rolls and you're like catching the water glasses and the salt and pepper on the table as everything goes flying one direction. It's
did the table have a little guardrail?
oh yeah, that's not, I
Oh,
mean,
Yeah, everywhere. Yeah, there's.
I feel seasick just watching you do that.
No, actually, we didn't have it so bad. It was a little bit rolly on the way over and really calm on the way back, I thought.
yeah, it was. But that's why I said it's a 50-50 because my first trip was like 30 foot each direction. The second trip was like 5-foot seas, and our trip it was rolly going and kind of okay coming back. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I think we're gonna move on to the.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me, everybody. Appreciate it.
I will mention that next month we have Jennifer from up at College Station and our own J.C. Anderson. I think that's what his name is. They're going to be talking about whales in Cocoa View. Or no, not Socorro.
Socorro.
Yeah. Okay, so that's next month.
So I guess, what time is it? We take a break or just go to the photo?
8:15, 8:20.
Just go to the photo contest?
Yeah, let's go to the photo contest and go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Hey,
Okay.
real quick,
All right, bye-bye.
Before she jumps off, Becky, I put a link to the NVIDIA Nerf stuff in the chat. So
Oh.
you grab that. That'll save you some hunting for it.
I just found it. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Since we're taking a second to start the photo contest, I'll say Brian is volunteered to take on the job of webmaster for HUPS. So thank you, Brian, for that. We look forward to taking over that position.
My pleasure. Thank you. I need you all to send me photos and input to put on the web.
I will do that. Yeah. Bother people for stuff. That's what everybody should do. I guess I wanted to also thank Joe Holden for holding down the fort in our webpage for all of these years. When he took it over from, I don't remember who it was. Was it Greg?
It's great.
Yeah, Greg was doing it. And he's done an excellent job. I wish he were here. Okay.
Okay.
I guess that's all we have.
All we have, for all you people that aren't going to, join us for Mexican food. The rest of us are gonna go out and have some Mexican food afterwards at, our normal place.
Bye, everybody. See you
Bye-bye.
next month.